Welcome back to the Food for the Faithful channel with your host, Bill Reimer. Where's the outrage? Where's the righteous indignation? Why aren't people willing to take proper parliamentary oversight of our country back, especially given all the latest revelations regarding what I was talking about 2 years ago? You can go back and look at the videos from that time that I produced. There was already solid evidence that the official narrative was, well, it didn't hold water. So regarding the collapse of the COVID narrative, the apocalypse is always revelatory by revealing what was always there. Corruption, convergence of interests, and alliances driven by motives of power and profiteering required to play their zero-sum games. These alliances are invariably fascistic and coercive, coalescing when a combination of the state and big business deliberately disseminate disinformation to force the citizens' compliance to their arbitrary and self-serving demands. To accomplish this, they use fear-mongering and the threat of force to cow the population into involuntary obedience, which is why we were never all in this together. This compelled outcome is the diametric opposite of free market capitalism, where all parties benefit from transactions based upon the exercise of free will rather than requisite compliance. I don't count the news as news anymore, and haven't done so in decades. Those of us who did our homework knew there was something fake about the pandemic narrative, which was used to lock us down, even as the globalists in the guise of investment bankers, big pharma, and big government colluded with the CCP to use an artificially manipulated virus as an excuse for the largest transference of wealth in all of human history. Then they had the temerity to promise this betrayal was an opportunity to build back better while assuring us we would own nothing and be happy. Now the legitimate questions are being asked, and now in part actually being answered as to the circumstances around the origins of the pathogen. I wonder how it remains possible for those of you who believe the lies you are being fed by our government, globalist organizations such as the WHO, WEF, AOL, can continue to place any credence in the massive conspiracy which has been perpetrated against you, aimed at robbing you of limited constitutional government under the rule of law and proper parliamentary oversight. The resulting cognitive dissonance from the latest revelations regarding the lab in Wuhan and Canada's involvement with it must be sufficient to make your heads implode. How do you account for these latest revelations when 2 years ago people like me warned you that you were being lied to and you called us kooks for caring enough to share what we had uncovered? The world's 10 richest men more than doubled their fortunes from $700 billion to $1.5 trillion at a rate of $15,000 per second, or $1.3 billion a day, during the first 2 years of a pandemic that has seen the incomes of 99% of humanity fall and over 160 million more people forced into poverty. That's from Oxfam. So that isn't an organization that is in any way, shape, or form right-wing. I told you so. I told you and I warned you. Democracy cannot function properly when citizens blindly place their faith in the state. It can't. And this blitzkrieg against our very sanity goes on unabated and on every front. Whether it's climate change, sexual deviancy, or COVID. The tactics used to push these narratives are invariably enforced, compulsory, obligatory, mandatory, involuntary, exacted, coerced, imposed, demanded, compelled, required, requisite, stipulated, dictated, ordained, prescribed, necessitated, unavoidable, inescapable, and de rigueur. Just yesterday, on International Women's Day, Trudeau engaged in social engineering by pushing cultural Marxist critical theory on us when he asserted that cross-dressers, for that is what they really are bona fide women. This is his twisted and insane idea of how to empower women by declaring that surgically altered cross-dressers are unadulterated women. He does so as to weaken the nation. Undoing our very evolutionary biology leaves us impotent in the face of a full-blown Marxist takedown of the West. Since if we can believe that men can be women, we will also surrender all other rational thought to the state's artificial dictates. Do you think they don't know the genetic difference between the sexes in communist China? No, that would damage the CCP. This is the poison Marxists like Trudeau feed us to utterly undermine the nuclear family, real femininity, and real masculinity. Is there any wonder, then, why this man is deep in bed with the murderous tyranny of Beijing, whose ability to compel the Chinese citizens with despotism can turn the nation around on a dime? Remember Trudeau's own words. There's a level of admiration I actually have for China because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to turn their economy around on a dime and say we need to go green, we need to start, investing in solar, Trudeau stated. There is a flexibility that I know Prime Minister Stephen Harper must dream about, having a dictatorship where you can do whatever you wanted. That I find quite interesting. Well, I find it quite pathological and terrifying that any Canadian Prime Minister would openly admire Marxism. Trudeau has taken 7 years to turn our economy into a debt-ridden ruin, where bureaucracy and over-regulation are killing the very spirit of free enterprise, along with undermining a sound energy policy which would respect the environment while utilizing Canada's vast resources responsibly. It is fascinating to note that if China had access to the enormous oil reserves with which Canada has been gifted, they sure wouldn't be leaving them in the ground. So Canada, where is your outrage? Where? Why aren't we laying siege to our sacred institutions to wrestle them back from the ideology possession of radical neo-Marxist sympathizers like Trudeau? Our nation is under the control of Xi Jinping, and I assure you that he is eyeing our resources to exploit them just as he has already leveraged the LPC to manipulate every single Canadian. No wonder the LPC is filibustering Parliament so that the full extent of China's influence over our government cannot come to light. Write to your MPs to demand transparency through a thorough investigation of Chinese influence over our electoral processes. It would appear many of them forgot long ago who they're actually supposed to be working for. Where is the outrage? These are things that you not just need to pray about, but you need to demand accountability for.